I'm just testing. I'm going to see if this works. I don't know if it'll work or not. My GoPro cutout said it was full. It's not full, but what can I do? Stupid thing. So I'm trying to put the rest of this story: property theft, mortgage fraud, estate embezzlement, and spouses robbed of matrimonial homes, all made legal in Canada. Okay, now just give me a minute here. I've got to find where I left off. What I didn't finish telling you was that with regards to my mother, by the time we found out, the police, I tried in 2008 to get the police to help me. I suspected my brother was stealing, but I didn't have the evidence and I didn't know how to get it. And my lawyer didn't seem to be able to help me either. Or didn't know what to do or how to find. I don't know what the problem was, but anyway, they refused because they couldn't find a crime. They couldn't find anything legally wrong. Well, that was because of the secret filing. So, I sold our home in Wasaga Beach to pay off her debts, and I sold off my share as well. And I lost all of that fighting through the courts and trying to keep my mother out of abject poverty. And I used up all my money trying to get rights for all Canadians, but I was ripped off by Trent Faldane. He just didn't give a shit. Basically, he lied to me. He said he really cared about human rights, but I started to run out of money, and he started to accuse me of a bunch of stupid shit. And at first, I forgave him because I loved him so much. Hindsight, I don't forgive him. I'm not God. I'll never forgive him for what he did. Because we could have won. We could have won. I had a valid case under Section 7 in the Charter of Rights. Anyway, I don't know what happened to that couple in Brantford that lost their home in April of 2018. It's on CTV. There's been no follow-up in the media. But like I say, there's hundreds of thousands every year that you'll never hear about. Now, the other thing to consider is that if stealing your property is legal, and it is legal because of secret filing in Canada, that means that our properties are a really bad investment. No matter how hard you work, how long you own your home and income properties, there is absolutely no protection for your property rights, spousal rights, in any province in Canada except for Saskatchewan. Now, Alberta and Manitoba banned secret filing, but there's still no protection for spousal rights. Only Saskatchewan demands spousal consent or a file in court of a separation or divorce. Otherwise, the spouse has the right to their home when the other spouse dies, except for in case of separation or divorce. And if you're legally married, why should you be robbed of half your matrimonial home? And my mother was married for 61 years to a monster, and she lost her home. And I lost my home in Wasaga Beach because I was devoted to my mother, and I don't regret that. But I really thought that I could fight the law, and I really thought that I was doing the right thing. Well, it was a waste of time. Our government is so corrupt in Canada, it's just making so much money, squandering it, making property theft, fraud, estate embezzlement, and robbing a spouse of their matrimonial homes, all be made legal. Now here's a couple of stories that are all true stories. Can't give you their names because I've been asked not to. Typical of victims, they're afraid to go public. They're humiliated or they're embarrassed or, I don't know, just scared. And even if they try to go public, the media won't publish the story anyway because I've been trying for 18 years, so what can you do? This travesty of injustice must stop, but it's not going to stop in my lifetime at the way things are going. And that's just how much your politicians care about human rights violations and democracy in Canada. Now in 2005, it's a matter of public record. Over 100 phones in and around the Toronto area, homeowners discover that a criminal has put mortgages on their home without their knowledge and in secret. Now, did the Ontario government consider banning secret filing to stop such crimes? No, not on your life. Instead, they decided the mortgages to the banks were legal, and the insurance companies had to pay off the mortgage. Of course, the insurance companies got their money back by simply increasing their fees. So, you think you're not being affected if you're not a victim? Oh, yes, you are. Insurance rates are more than triple in the last 10 years because of this stuff like this. Now, as for the criminals, they were never caught. They skipped the country, and there's no doubt living the high life in the Bahamas or in the Mediterranean with the millions they ripped off. This story did not make a blip in the media at the time, and nothing has ever been done to ban secret filing since. Nor has it even been considered by any political leader or any Canadian party. A personal friend of mine, a veteran of 3 wars at 92, discovered his nephew had taken title to his home. I took him to my lawyer to find out how and why. He had unknowingly signed what he thought was a will, leaving his home to his nephew after his death, but what the nephew had done was had him sign a transfer of title, which actually is fraud. And he transferred it in secret so that my friend didn't even know how he lost title to his home. He was too ill and certainly didn't have any money. It would have cost, the lawyer wanted $50,000 cash up front to even fight it. And it could have gone to $100,000. Like, I've already gone through $100,000, and I'm not anywhere near close to having any justice. And I'll never get my homes and properties back, and I'll never get my money back. Okay, so what I did was I contacted the Ottawa's Veterans Association to help him, and they put me in touch with a man by the name of Vic. And Vic said, Trudy, it's not your job. He's a veteran. And he said that Canadian government now made it illegal for veterans to go to an associate to fight for them. Yeah, this could only happen in Canada. That as a veteran, he had to do the fighting himself. Well, he wasn't well enough. But anyway, Vic took over. And they got him into a nursing resident and made him as comfortable as possibly could. And, he thanked me shortly before he died for trying to help him. And it was very sad. You know, his property was worth a lot of money and he could have left it to great-great-grandchildren. But unfortunately, he was left with nothing. And Ontario millionaires' heirs lost their inheritance from their father and never understood why. Now, this story came to me also through a personal friend, and it was because I said to him, Ontario law allows for an executor to take title and ownership to all properties after you die. And he does it in secret, he or she. So his executor transferred title in secret, sold the properties, and left for parts unknown with the money. Police refused to even investigate since transferring title in secret is legal. So the heirs never knew what happened. By the time this person told me the story, he said, well, he wasn't going to tell them the truth now because it was done by a family member several years ago, and he didn't want to open up a can of worms. So he decided not to tell them the truth because it would just upset them, and there was nothing they could do about it anyhow because it was done legally. So what I have for you later on is I will give you information how to change your will so that you can stop this. The law makes it legal. So every person who has a will has to put a separate clause in to stop it. Otherwise, it can be done. A Hamilton man in his 30s got a contract job out of town, luckily long before the market boom. He gave his house key to a lady friend to check it while away. When he returned 4 years later, discovered she had changed the locks, moved in, had registered her name on title to his home in secret. Of course. Because as a registered owner in Canada, other than Saskatchewan, you don't have the right to be notified that somebody's decided to put their name on title to your home. His lawyer advised him that the cost and years of fighting her would exceed the value, so he was forced to pay her half the current market value to get her name off title and regain possession of his home. Fortunately, this particular man made enough money that year, while away, that he could afford to do that. Most victims are not so lucky to have such cash available. Nor was it fair. This was not a lover. This was not a common law wife. She had no right to title, but it was just cheaper. You see, this is what happens. It was just cheaper to let the criminal get away with the theft. A gentle, elderly Sudbury widower for many years, lonely, developed a friendship with a woman for someone to have dinner with, go to movies with, not a lover, but simply a companion, a friend who did not live with him. In his will, he left his home to his son, a construction laborer, married with 3 young children, renting, unable to afford a home. When this gentle man senior died, his son's lawyer discovered the woman was on title filed in secret with no permission or notice to his father. The lawyer demanded $50,000 cash up front, or was just not worth his time to fight her in court. The son was a poor, uneducated, hard-working laborer, not having the kind of money, so he was forced to abandon it and continues to live in a rental unit to this day. Frankly, that lawyer was a mercenary jerk. He could have at least filed for his father's half title, partition to sell, which would have not cost very much and got him at least half the value. Instead, he got nothing and walked away. Because he didn't know any better and the lawyer didn't care. See, that's another thing, eh? Bad enough the law makes it legal. Bad enough the court system rips you off. But the lawyers sit on their fat butts, collect money from you, and allow you to be ripped off. Yeah, that's Canada. A middle-aged single mother who worked 2 jobs to raise her children, purchased a home, paid the mortgage off after 30 years. With her children all on their own working, she began to date a charming man. He went and put his name in secret on title to the home, put on a mortgage above its market value with 3 separate financial lenders also in secret. Then he quickly disappeared. She lost her home and is now living in subsidized housing, still cleaning houses at 75 to survive. And of course, she never even went to a lawyer. The lawyer said there's nothing she could do. So that was the end of that. So you never heard about her. Of course, she won't go public either because she's too embarrassed. She feels that somehow it was all her fault because she fell in love with the wrong man. Oh, please, women. God almighty. You're so gutless. But anyway, I understand. My mother was the same. Another woman now in her 60s, a widower, lost her home to her son. He also in secret got his name on title to her home, as did my brother to my mother, ran up debts, forced to sell off to pay off the debt. She wound up in abject poverty, unable to afford even a senior subsidized residency. When she turned 65, she moved into a depressing basement apartment. Saving her money at 70, she moved into another main floor apartment where she is grateful and she is not trapped in a drug-infested, subsidized complex like her girlfriend is. You see, it's not just the money. You destroy a person's life. Something inside of them dies. So many victims of secret filing stories are never told. Their plight is trapped in a corrupt court system designed for criminals, makes them victims of fraud, embezzlement, estate funds, and robbing spouses of all their legal rights. Because it's legal. It's legal to commit these crimes in Canada. It's legal. Those that wind up in court are never made public because our media chooses to ignore it completely. Beware. Canadian marriage laws allow for secret severance of joint tenancy on your matrimonial home. No matter how long you were married, you can lose your home. You buy your home in joint tenancy, which means if one dies, the other automatically has the home. Of course, that is how it should be. But what about disease? Early onset dementia, strokes, and Alzheimer's. Years before a diagnosis, there can be subtle symptoms you don't recognize and personality changes. Suddenly, without warning, they can sever your joint tenancy in secret just because they got mad at you because you didn't cook their favorite meal, or just because they became jerks and because they feel like it. And through no fault of your own, after they die, you discover you don't own the house. The point is, in Ontario and every province in Canada, except for Saskatchewan, they can sever the joint tenancy in secret. And they can do it without your consent. In Saskatchewan, severance of joint tenancy can only be done with consent or through a court order in a separation and divorce. That's how it should be. That's Saskatchewan law. And look up Saskatchewan law. It's very easy to find it. I'll type that up on the statute. 1989 Homestead Law. Okay? Now, despite my real estate career in 24 years working in advertising, marketing, corporations, investments, design, and contract, I had no idea that anyone could steal your rights, property rights in secret. That Canadian laws made property theft, fraud, embezzlement of estate funds all legal. Now, as to the embezzlement of the estate funds being legal, it's because the executor is allowed to take title to all your properties. And if there's a surviving spouse, such as what my mother was, she didn't even have the right to know that he took title to the properties. Had she known that, then I would have gotten a different lawyer, a criminal lawyer, and I would have had him charged in 2008. But we never got to that information. And of course, the police wouldn't charge him because what he did was legal. Okay? Get real, people. Media has never, in over 100 years, ever published the full truth on our laws in Canada. Not to this day. August 21st, 2018. Not to this day. And I have written to every one of them. I've sent them the proof. I've sent them the documented evidence. Not to this day. Nobody cares. Now, my mother found out at the age of 95 only because we faced a public auction of our properties. My brother had embezzled and taken all the rental income into his own pocket. He committed income tax fraud, property theft fraud. Never got charged by the police. I'm still fighting in court. And even if I win, I lose. I'm only going through this fight to have it on record. But there will never be any justice. I lived a 19-year nightmare, and her estate of over $1 million stolen. She died with a broken heart, yes. She also died as a direct result of clindamycin and medical neglect. But on top of that, there was no reason for her to have died with a broken heart. She didn't deserve that. And I don't deserve what I've gone through for 19 years. I'm still in court, and I expect the stress of it all will either cost me my life or what's left of my savings. Fraud, property theft is rampant, common, because of legal secret filing in Canada. Cruel sociopathic spouses like my father, just for the sheer pleasure, sever joint tenancy in secret. He knew we had no spousal protection or right to be notified. He was an educated man. Men like him do it knowing that after they die, his spouse will not have title to the matrimonial home. Knowing his executor will steal everything, forcing me and my mother in court after he dies. He did it just for the sadistic pleasure. And there isn't a thing we can do about it because the law made it legal. In fact, he called me before he died, telling me my brother would steal everything and I would spend the rest of my life in court fighting him. If there's a hell, he's there, burning, I hope. But I never had a clue what he meant until 18 years after his death. And it was so unnecessary. And in hindsight, I can tell you right now, if I had had the right to be notified even, I could have done something to put a stop to it. But property owners, registered owners in Canada, don't even have that simple right to be notified to any change on title. No, that's Canada. I was forced to sell a beautiful home, and I sacrificed my life to rescue my mother from poverty. I don't regret doing that. But it should have never happened. And it couldn't have happened in Saskatchewan. He cleaned out everything. I took care of my mother for 17 years trying to find out what happened to our property rights and all the money that was in the accounts and all the rental income. I didn't even have a right. The accountant wouldn't even. I had to pay $2,000 to an accountant to fight my brother's estate accountant to even find out that he'd committed income tax fraud. Yeah. I didn't even have the right as my mother's executor to a copy of the estate files. That's Canadian law. That's insane. This is not a democracy, it's a dictatorship of the worst kind. Because it's a pretend democracy. As a Canadian, you actually think you've got rights. Well, you don't. So as an executor, he pocketed all the rental income, and he didn't pay the taxes for several years, also in secret. Because everything is allowed in secret, we didn't even have the right to be notified that he wasn't paying the taxes. And by then we were under power sale. So then another crook came along and offered me assistance and help. And I was sick, paralyzed. I have a tumor on my leg. I was on ice packs. I couldn't read or write. I couldn't function. So I agreed to lend him what money I had to help fight, and he absconded with the money. I was just left so vulnerable. And the police wouldn't lift a finger to help me. Not because they didn't care, don't get me wrong, because I have a very good relationship with the police in Sudbury. In fact, I've helped them change their wills so that they won't become victims. And I've given them the information so they've gotten title insurance to protect from mortgage fraud. There's a little village in Valcarin, dozens of homes. People all lost their homes. That never even made media. One of the musicians was telling me he had a friend that lost their home in Valcarin to mortgage fraud. And I spent, $60,000 with Trent Faldine to file an affidavit against the law that promotes property theft and fraud and estate embezzlement. And he fired me, refusing to complete the affidavit. So I got $60,000, and 4 years later, and I got nothing. So all of this is true. Every word is true. And if you are a victim of property theft, or before you buy a home, you better check out the law. Buy in Saskatchewan or don't buy in Canada. Now I'm going to talk to you about wills and estates. This crime can only happen in family life in Canada. No other country allows for this. You are young, blissfully happy, marrying your sweetheart. You both work, buy your first home to raise a family, small at first. Then once the first mortgage is paid off, you borrow and expand the house to a second floor with 4 bedrooms. Enlarge the living room. You work as a wife. You work 6 days a week and contribute to the home. And your husband is a laborer or a miner or whatever, or a mechanic. All very hard work, but the process is exhilarating. You go through tough times, job layoffs, strikes at work, children, childhood diseases. Often money is tight, so you hire a trusted babysitter and go back to work. Whatever your situation is, you pull together as a family, you persevere, weather the ups and downs. A flood, sewer backup, garage fire nearly kills your husband, you survive. You know you're lucky you have a family that is blessed with children that take part-time jobs to help out. Your children grow up, graduate, and go into careers of their own. You keep on working because you love being with people. As a woman, you work in sales. Your husband works because he has to. May not like it, but that's how he was raised. A man works to provide his family. You both finally reach retirement years, plan to spend more time together. Or you join a dance group, as my parents did, and just having fun. Sometime your husband gets moody, withdrawn, but you think that is just part of getting older. Slowly he is changing. You're not spending as much time together. His memory is not what it used to be. But then at 70, who is? His doctor says his heart is slowing down. He has to rest more. Some years later, he is more baby-like, has to wear diapers. You could put him in a nursing home, but you don't. You take on the job of getting him dressed, bathing him, helping him to the washroom without help, because that's how you were raised. Okay, it is a burden, but you feel lucky. He has many buddies that come over and keep him company often, so you get to go out and have a bit of fun with friends. Some people get old and get violent. He just gets more quiet, silent, and withdrawn. Then that fatal day comes and his heart gives out. He is rushed to the hospital, but after a few weeks he dies. You both have joint bank accounts. Your home is in joint tenancy, both names, so you don't have any problems, or so you think. Suddenly you get served notice that you don't own your home. Several years later. Your husband, without your knowledge, severed joint tenancy in secret. Yes, in secret. Your lawyers say it's perfectly legal and there's nothing you can do. You either buy the other person out or you sell. This is not a rare story, but it's common in Canada. Thousands of victims in Canada are losing their homes due to secret filing and due to severance of joint tenancy without consent. And they do not even have the right to be notified. This is legal in every province but Saskatchewan. This is not a made-up story. This is happening to hundreds of thousands of people every day, coast to coast. I researched for 3 years the Canadian court case histories, and few even made it to court. The legal costs are just too high. Those that did all lost in lower court. One case made it to the Supreme Court of Canada and still lost, even though the judge, out of 100 years of research I did, one judge made a statement that it seemed unfair. It was a case in Ontario. One woman did it to her husband without his knowledge. A father did it in secret to his daughter who lived together in joint tenancy without their knowledge until he died. She lost her case. So many untold stories, all so tragic, all due to secret filing, a criminal law that is legal only in Canada. Severance of joint tenancy should be illegal without consent on the matrimonial home. And on properties, it still should not be legal in secret. You own a business, you've got a joint tenancy on the property because you're in partnership. You should have the right to know about severance. It should not just be done behind your back in secret. Yes, that's the story of what's happening coast to coast in Canada. And my father did it to my mother because it gave him pleasure. And my brother did it to my mother because it gave him pleasure. And his family all helped him do it. And they all knew what he was doing because it gave them pleasure. There was so much more money that could have been made if my brother hadn't been such a criminal maniac. None of it was necessary. But you see, criminals don't always do it just for the money. They do it for the pleasure, the sadistic pleasure. Victim after victim. Something inside of you dies. You're never the same afterwards. You don't just lose your home and lose all your money and wind up in poverty. Something inside of you dies. The only thing that keeps me going and kept me going all this time is I look at young mothers and their children at the beach. And I wonder which one of them will wind up like me and like their mother. Yes, the executor has the right to take title to all your properties when you die. And if severance has been done without your knowledge, then the executor takes half your home and half your properties. And if both are dead, then they just sell it and take off, and the heirs don't even have the right to know. Yes, all perfectly legal in Canada. Now here's the paragraph that you need to put in your will. The first paragraph usually states, I revoke all former wills and codicils previously made by me. Then followed by paragraph 2, you add as follow. I appoint, first name, last name, to be executor of my will. However, under no circumstances shall my named executor have the authority to be listed as a registered owner on title in a personal capacity to any of my estate properties, despite that Section 121 of the Ontario Land Titles Act or any other legislation in Canada that may permit a transmission to that effect. My executor is a trustee only. They are not allowed to take rental income. They are not allowed to take ownership title to the matrimonial home or properties whatsoever. They are only to act as trustee and must report all actions to all heirs. Now that's what you got to put in there. And if you don't, well, then you don't care about what happens to your heirs and your children and your children's children. That's what you have to do to save your heirs from being robbed. But the bottom line is, all secret filing should be banned in Canada coast to coast, and every Canadian should have the same laws as Saskatchewan and protection from property theft, protection from mortgage fraud, protection from estate embezzlement, and protection from spousal rights being robbed. No severance of joint tenancy on the matrimonial home without consent. Yes, that's what would make a democracy in Canada. Please share. Millions of people are being robbed. And you're being robbed right now if you're a Canadian, because it's costing you in your insurance and it's costing you in your taxes. That's right. There is no escape. We are all victims, no matter what. There's no getting away from it. And I hope that this video outlives me, and that this story eventually gets told, and that there will be a democracy for Canadians and for the next generation, and that no child should ever go through what I went through. God bless.